Now they're telling you your work means nothing? What does mean anything? And how long can a society continue that doesn't have meaning?
How many of you watching have heard this phrase? You're just being lazy, or you complain about being tired too much, man up, or something along those lines. If you're a living, breathing human being, then I'm sure you've heard those phrases. Then you buckled down and kept working because what other option was there? You don't want to be known as lazy. We live in a world where you often have to choose whether you want to spend time on your passion, whether that passion is boxing, computers, soccer, trains, or whatever other thing you like to spend your time on, and saving. Saving for a hypothetical future where you might do those things that you love, but statistically that future will never come. If you feel tired all the time, even if you're doing a job that you love, there's nothing wrong with you, and you're not alone. The American dream is the 40-hour work week, the wife to go home to, and the white picket fence. Then if you work hard enough, you'll get to send your kids to college and get to retire in Florida. I don't need to be the one to tell you that that's a myth. The 40-hour work week came from the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, one person could do the work of 100 people with the help of machinery. So, even though there was an explosion of new factories, there was a super high unemployment rate. Workers were very easily replaceable, so factories demanded 16-hour workdays, 6 days a week with no paid holidays or vacation. If you got injured on the line, well, you're out of luck because your pay would be suspended and you would most likely be fired. Also, since no one else wants to stop working, no one will help you while you die on the floor. By the way, I am not only describing the conditions in the Industrial Revolution, I am describing exactly what happened at an Amazon distribution facility recently. It's worth it, of course, that his weird-looking boss can ride to space for 15 minutes in a suggestively shaped rocket. Anyway, the average work week during this time was a full 96 hours. Then something radical happened. The concept of a union came about. I was actually talking to someone and unions came up for some reason. This person had no idea what a union was. I wasn't going to explain what a union was in this video until I had that interaction. A union is an alliance of all the workers in one given company or industry. Those workers will vote for a representative to negotiate with the company for better benefits. If the company refuses the terms that the workers lay out, then they can strike. A strike is basically when all the workers refuse to work, which makes the company screech to a halt. Most of the time, workers will stand outside of their workplace in what's called a picket line. When a strike happens, there are only two ways to end it. The company can agree to the terms laid out by the workers, or they can use violence to force the workers back to work. Okay, back to our main subject.
They were the same, but we get compensated very differently.
Yes.
We work the same hours as you, and you just said we work a lot harder.
You do. So.
But we get paid a lot less.
Word. Like next to no benefits.
I know. God, what is that?
Exactly.
It blows, man.
You know, this would not happen if we had a union.
That's what I'm talking about.
Whoa. Yeah.
Unions demanded things like the 40-hour work week, paid sick leave, and many other benefits that we take for granted today. In 1938, all of this labor action later culminated in the Fair Labor Standards Act that required all hours after 44 to be counted as overtime. Then just 2 years later, it was shortened to 40. So at this point, the law still does require that time after 40 hours counts as overtime, but that is not actually the case. So what happened? Well, another industrial revolution of sorts happened, the internet. With the internet came something called 24-hour availability. With things like texting and email, your employer can contact you at any time and you are expected to respond. Not only that, but workers often go home with homework that they have to get done before the next day. Those hours that they spend on those projects often go uncompensated. These two components would silently turn the 40-hour work week into a 50 or even 60-hour work week. The internet also made us more productive. In the time span of 40 hours, we are 480% more productive than our 1950s counterparts. So with today's tools, we should, in theory, be able to afford the same standard of living while only working 10 hours. Of course, that's not the case. Even though we are working more hours and being much more productive, pay has remained stagnant. Taking account for inflation, pay has gone down a full 13.2% for the middle class and down 28.8% for the lower class. Working as much as we do is also very damaging. More people than ever today are experiencing burnout. Contrary to popular belief, burnout is not just an emotional response to overworking. Burnout has a very physical effect. According to this study, burnout can cause a higher chance of heart disease and reduce cognitive function. We are working so much that our brains are being permanently damaged. Not only that, but we often force workers to come into work despite being sick, which not only risks spreading the disease to everyone, but also makes things a lot worse for the sick person who should be resting or going to the doctor. But they can't do either because they don't get sick leave and they don't have affordable healthcare. It wasn't always like this. Humans in their current form have been around for about 300,000 years. Basically, people 300,000 years ago were just as smart as we are now, but they just didn't know as much. We don't have much data for most of those years, but here's what we do know. On Earth, there are currently a few societies who have remained in the same hunter-gatherer state that we were in for most of our history. So from these societies, we know what most human civilizations look like up until about 10,000 years ago. Now I want you to guess how long the average work week is for these societies. They have an average work week of 15 hours. For the vast majority of human history, each individual human worked 15 hours a week. We evolved to work a grand total of 15 hours a week. We are not designed to work 40 hours a week, let alone 60. The people interviewed by the journalist had other questions for him besides how long people worked. They also asked, why did government officials who sat in air-conditioned offices drinking coffee all day get paid so much more than the young men they sent out to dig ditches? Why, when people were paid for their work, did they still go back the following day rather than enjoy the fruits of their labor? And why did people work so hard to acquire more wealth than they could ever possibly need or enjoy? Man, these people sound like freedom-hating communists. Keep in mind that these are the people we call savages. Alright, we've established that work sucks and that we do too much of it. So why do we do it? This work must justify something, right? I mean, we have things like smartphones and fridges and they don't. We must be getting something out of this work. My answer to that is someone is getting something out of all this extra work. It's not all for nothing. It is for something, it's just that you're not going to like the something that it's for. You may not be making more money, but your boss sure is. All of this overworking and underpaying is happening at the same time companies are making record high profits. During the COVID-19 pandemic, where millions of Americans felt the squeeze and over 1 million Americans have died, corporations raked in the highest profits in decades. While at the same time, they claimed that they couldn't afford to keep paying employees, so many people got fired. In order to prevent this, the government offered what was called PPE loans to companies. Many companies then took these loans and fired people anyway. Jeff Bezos made $31 million an hour in 2021. Can you honestly say that he worked 2 million times harder than his employees at his warehouses? I don't think you can. This isn't happening because these corporations are evil or because there's some evil people pulling the strings. This is happening because that's the name of the game. Capitalism is based on constant growth. If a company isn't more and more profitable every year, it's no longer fulfilling its fiduciary responsibility. So what happens when companies no longer have anything to grow into, when they've monopolized their industry? Well, in order to increase profit margins, they cut benefits, cut pay, and lay off workers. They make you do more work for less pay because that makes them more profit. No matter what form of capitalism, the incentive will always be to make more profit. So companies will always try to expand into what they can. If they run out of space, they will inevitably expand into their employees. We don't have to live this way. There is an alternative to this way of living. Instead of one person owning a company, the people who actually do the labor, who actually make a company work, can own it instead. With the internet may have came 24-hour availability, but it also came with the tools for us to work less and enjoy life more. The reality is, the only thing we know for a fact is that we only get one life. With that in mind, we have the resources as a society to afford everyone a comfortable and enjoyable life. Instead of working ourselves to death and being tired all the time, we can enjoy the fruits of our labor and take a day off. Spend it with family, with friends, learn an instrument, play with trains. Do what you love simply because we as a society can afford it. There should be more to life and your day than just work. We as humans are fundamentally social animals. We should design society around that fact and not around the profits of corporations. There is some hope on this front. The 40-hour work week has declined in a large part due to union membership declining rapidly in the United States. But that's changing. Thanks to the work of Chris Smalls as well as many other union leaders around America, union membership is picking back up again. They're gaining power despite the powers of capital being against them. There are already strikes happening all over the country to demand better benefits, better pay, and less hours. The number one most effective way to change your workplace is solidarity with your fellow workers. There is something you can do to help. If you're in a job that you believe is exploiting you, research unions that support your industry or profession. If you can't find any in your area, form your own. It's a hard and risky fight, but if you're successful, it will be worth it. Don't be an armchair politician. Remember, united we bargain, divided we beg. With that in mind, there is something I want to spread awareness of. You may have heard about the exploited rail workers and how they're threatening to strike. You may have also heard that Joe Biden, our supposedly pro-union president, stopped the strike. How he did was anti-union at the least and strike-breaking at the worst. Rail workers in this country were guaranteed no paid sick days and low pay, while at the same time working long hours despite them being vital to our economy. So their union demanded paid sick leave, less hours, and higher pay, which is frankly the bare minimum. Instead of granting workers the bare minimum, the Biden admin proposed a deal that did include slightly higher pay but only guaranteed one paid sick day a year. The union refused these exploitative terms, but in order to avert a strike, Joe Biden pushed a bill to force his deal through, and that bill passed. He followed the wishes of a corporation and directly ignored the wishes of the workers. Joe Biden picked profits over these workers being able to see their families and stay home when they're sick. I don't think I have to tell you that that's disgusting and it has to change.